custard in that tart?
I know it was supposed to be his stomach growling, but that really made it sound like Aang farted. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at egg custard tarts from Avatar The Last Airbender. First up, probably the most accurate version of the show, the Hong Kong style egg tart. Because try as I might, I can't seem to drop this egg for comedic purposes, so let's get started on our pastry shell. Into a food processor goes 225 grams of all-purpose flour, 50 grams of powdered sugar, and 9 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We're just going to pulse those together a few times until the mixture resembles wet sand. As you might be able to tell, we're making a sort of short crust pastry here, but instead of the usual ice water, we have one large beaten egg, which we're going to add to the food processor and process until the mixture comes together to form an extremely soft ball of dough. A ball which we are going to wrap in plastic wrap and refrigerate for about half an hour or until ready to use, during which time we're going to make our custard, the Hong Kong variation of which is quite unlike any I've made before. First up, we've got 150 ml of very hot tap water, to which we're going to add 75 grams of superfine sugar. I've also got half a teaspoon of vanilla powder here, but you can be a normal human being and use half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Tiny whisk until dissolved. Tiny whisk 2 large eggs into 85 ml of evaporated milk, and then regular size whisk everything together in a larger bowl than the one you picked out. Then we're going to strain this mixture into a pour-friendly container for easier pouring action down the line. And then it's time to cut our pastry and line our tart molds, in this case a cupcake tin. Hong Kong style egg tarts usually use a fluted baking tin, but the one in Avatar The Last Airbender appeared to have flat, straight sides. So on a well-floured surface with a well-floured rolling pin, we are rolling the dough out to a thickness of 6 millimeters, cutting into rounds just a bit larger than the diameter of our cupcake tin, and beginning to line the tins with our pastry. Simply press down into the cup and squish it up the sides. If you feel like you're over squishing your dough, don't be afraid to roll out your rounds just a little bit thinner before lining the tin. And as you can see, we want pastry shells that are ever so coquettishly peeking at us over the edge of the cupcake tin. Then before filling with our custard, we're going to skim off any remaining pesky foam that's sitting atop the egg mixture, and then we're going to fill our egg tarts anywhere from 3/4 to 7/8 of the way full, before placing the whole thing on a rim baking sheet to prevent spillage. Then baking in a preheated 400 Fahrenheit oven for 10 minutes, lowering the heat to 350 and baking for another 15 until the pastry is golden brown and the filling is set but still very, very jiggly. Once they are just cool enough to handle, go ahead and pop them out the tin and ideally serve them while still nice and warm. And as you can see, we've got a nice tender but crisp pastry crust, almost reminiscent of a sugar cookie, and a soft, creamy, custardy interior. Now, another common preparation for these is with homemade or store-bought puff pastry, but I think this is the simplest and most show-accurate version, and it's a worthy member of the Clean Custard Cup Club. But now let's go completely off the reservation and use this as an excuse to make pasteis de nata, the very difficult Portuguese version you might have seen on the last season of the Great British Baking Show. First, we're combining 150 grams of all-purpose flour with 1 gram of kosher salt. Tiny whisk until homogeneous, and add 80 milliliters of water. As you might be able to tell, one of my New Year's resolutions is to use metric more often. Then go ahead and knead this until a shaggy, sticky dough forms. Then we gotta let it rest for 20 minutes, and what we're not gonna do is wrap it in plastic wrap. That's what we're not gonna do. I did this for demonstration purposes, I didn't screw up. Instead, we're gonna plop the rough dough down on a well-floured surface and top it with a bowl. This is going to allow our gluten to relax so we can roll it out to about 12 by 12 inches. I'm sorry, did I say 12 inches? I meant 30.5 by 30.5 centimeters. Then I have here 1 stick, or 113 grams, of unsalted, very soft butter, 1/3 of which I'm going to spread over about 2/3 of our lean dough. Did that make any sense? Which we are then going to laminate by folding the unbuttered third of the dough over the centered buttered bit, and then folding the remaining buttered third over that, effectively closing it up like a pamphlet. Are pamphlets metric? I don't even know. Anyway, we are rotating it 90 degrees, rolling it back out to a square, and repeating the process once more before rolling it out one last time and spreading the remaining third of the butter over about 90% of the surface area of our dough, with the exception of a 2.5 centimeter border, which we are going to moisten with wetted fingers, and beginning to tightly roll the dough into a log from the opposite end, rolling and pressing lightly to seal shut, wrapping in plastic wrap, and refrigerating for at least 2 hours, preferably overnight. While that chills, we gotta make the Portuguese Portuguese version of our egg custard. This starts with a sugar syrup. Into a medium saucepan goes 150 grams of granulated sugar, 75 ml of water, 1 metric stick of cinnamon, and half the peel of 1 lemon that we have thoroughly scrubbed to get rid of any protective wax. We're then simply bringing this mixture to a simmer until all the sugar has dissolved, taking it off the heat and allowing it to cool completely for 30 minutes. Once cooled, it's time to work on another very strange egg custard formulation. Into a large bowl goes 40 grams of all-purpose flour, and then I've got 1.5 cups, or about 350 milliliters of whole milk here, about a third of which I'm going to add to the flour. Regular size whisking thoroughly until thick and creamy and no lumps remain. Then set that aside because we're headed over to the stovetop where we're pouring the remaining milk into a large saucepan. Heating over medium-low heat until just simmering, there we go. At which point we're going to add our flour milk slurry, whisking constantly and cooking for 1 to 3 minutes until it becomes thick, gooey, and or creamy, almost like a very thick, lumpless pancake batter. I shudder to think of the descriptors that Maddie Matheson might use. Anyway, at this point we're going to kill the heat, which as you can see I forgot to do. Add the sugar syrup, straining for easier combination, along with my half teaspoon of vanilla powder or your half teaspoon of vanilla extract, and whisking thoroughly to combine until slightly cooled off, at which point we're going to add 6 large egg yolks. The hotter your mixture is, the faster you're going to have to whisk, otherwise you're going to scramble your eggs. But hopefully you should end up with a smooth, custardy custard, which just for the sake of smoothness we're going to strain once again to catch any errant lumps. Also keep an eye out for my daytime listening jazz album For the Sake of Smoothness, available in 2025. Alright, now that we've got our custard made and we're keeping it warm right off camera, we're retrieving our dough from the fridge, which should have formed a nice hard log. Go ahead and angrily shake it out of the plastic wrap onto a lightly floured work surface, trim off the uneven edges, and then it's time to divide this into 12 equally sized pieces, each of which, when you look at them from the side, should have a tight butter swirl. This is going to give the pasteis de nata their characteristic flaky, crunchy, swirly bottom. Now all we've got to do is not screw up the many delicate layers of butter we've worked so hard to engineer. We're going to start by placing a dough round in the center of our cupcake tin and start pressing it down from the center out, trying to first cover the bottom of the tin with pastry followed by the sides. It's going to take a bit of practice, but after maybe your 50th or 100th batch, you should make these with the proficiency of a Portuguese patissier person. Go ahead and rinse and repeat until the cupcake tin is full, and as before, we want the pastry to be just peeking above the rim of the cup. Then we're going to fill these 3/4 or 75% of the way full with our egg custard mixture. Then we're placing these guys on a preheated baking sheet that we've had in a 500° Fahrenheit oven for about 20 minutes. Oh boy, I forgot about temperatures. Back into a 500° Fahrenheit or 260° Celsius oven they go for 12 to 16 minutes or until the custard is puffed, lightly browned, and the pastry is nothing short of gorgeous, hopefully with the characteristic swirl on the bottom. I could just tell you that this is amazing and a member of the Clean Plate Club, but I'll let my pastry do the talking.